The first gunshot echoed through Westfield Mall like a thunderclap. Marcus Reed had just stepped out of the electronics store, bag of clearance jeans in hand, when chaos erupted. People froze mid-stride, heads turning sharply, trying to locate the source. Somewhere in the distance, a baby started crying. Near the food court, a man in a black hoodie pushed through the crowd, moving with dangerous purpose, one hand hidden deep in his sleeve. Then, Marcus saw her. A little girl in a yellow dress with white flowers, standing completely alone on the wide, gleaming tile floor. She held a pink ice cream cone in her small brown hand, her face a mask of confusion and fear. Her mother wasn't there. The man in the hoodie was heading straight toward her, pace quickening with each step. Marcus's body reacted before his mind could fully process the danger. Years of Marine training overrode civilian hesitation, muscle memory taking control. He moved fast, cutting through frozen shoppers, old instincts flooding back like they'd never left. He was almost to her when the second gunshot rang out, loud and terrifyingly close. Marcus hit the girl with his shoulder, wrapping her up protectively in his arms and taking them both to the ground in a controlled fall. Her ice cream splattered across the tiles in a pink mess. Sharp, searing pain tore through his right arm, but he held her tight against his chest, his body shielding hers completely. "You okay, kid?" he asked, his deep voice gentle as he carefully checked her over for any injuries. She was shaking violently, but appeared unhurt. The bullet had hit him, not her. He'd succeeded. Mall security rushed over from multiple directions, radios crackling with urgent communications. The man in the hoodie had fled into the panicked crowd, disappearing among the chaos. Marcus kept his eyes on the girl as sirens wailed in the growing distance, making absolutely sure she was truly safe before he'd let her go. Then a woman came running, tall, elegant even in her panic, dressed in a dark blazer and pencil skirt, her heels clicking hard and fast on the tile. Her natural curls bounced as she dropped to her knees beside them, pulling the child into her arms with desperate urgency. "Lila! Oh my God, baby!" Her brown skin was flushed with panic and terror as she checked her daughter over frantically, hands trembling but methodical. Then her dark, intelligent eyes found Marcus, specifically the blood soaking through his faded flannel shirt, spreading across the fabric. Her expression shifted dramatically from raw maternal fear to something cooler, more calculating. This wasn't just a terrified mother. This was someone accustomed to crisis management, to assessing situations rapidly under extreme pressure. "Thank you," she breathed, voice controlled despite the circumstances, still holding her daughter protectively, while studying Marcus with eyes that seemed to catalog every detail about him. Marcus nodded once, feeling suddenly awkward and exposed under her intense scrutiny. 20 minutes later, Marcus sat in the back of an ambulance, his muscular dark arm wrapped carefully in clean white gauze. The EMT, a young woman with kind eyes and gentle hands, asked if he wanted to go to the hospital for proper treatment and stitches, but he declined firmly. He couldn't afford another medical bill, not with his current insurance situation, or lack thereof. At 34, Marcus lived a quiet, carefully managed life built on strict budgeting. He worked nights stocking heavy shelves at a warehouse on the industrial edge of town, loading trucks and organizing pallets until dawn broke. He had a small, 2-bedroom apartment in a modest, working-class neighborhood where his 8-year-old son Caleb slept in the room with the only window that caught the morning light just right. Marcus didn't complain much about his circumstances, had learned long ago that complaining changed nothing. But when people saw him, worn jeans, calloused dark hands, faded baseball cap pulled low over his eyes, they didn't expect much from him. That was usually fine with him. Being underestimated meant being left alone, invisible. The woman from the mall stood about 20 feet away now, still holding her daughter close, occasionally glancing over at Marcus. Her name was Evelyn Cross, Marcus had overheard the police saying. You could tell by the way she spoke to the officers, calm, firm, measured, choosing each word carefully, that she was someone used to being in control, to wielding authority. She wore clothes that probably cost more than Marcus made in an entire month of night shifts. People kept approaching her with obvious deference, treating her like someone genuinely important. Later, he'd learn she was the CEO of Horizon Innovations, a rapidly growing tech company making waves in the city's business community. Everyone in professional circles seemed to know her name. Evelyn's primary focus remained on her daughter, checking her over repeatedly with a mother's thorough concern. But her eyes kept sliding back to Marcus, measuring him carefully as if trying to solve a complex puzzle he represented. There was something deeply analytical in her gaze, like she was collecting data, forming assessments, calculating risks. The police took statements from everyone present. Marcus's was brief and factual, giving them just what they needed. One officer, a middle-aged white man with tired, suspicious eyes, barely looked up from his clipboard. So, you just happened to be there at exactly the right time? His tone carried more than a hint of suspicion. As if heroism from someone who looked like Marcus in this neighborhood couldn't possibly be genuine or coincidental. Yeah, just walking by at the wrong time, Marcus replied simply, not bothering to elaborate or defend himself. The officer wrote something down in his notes, but didn't thank him for his service, didn't even make brief eye contact, didn't acknowledge the bleeding wound in Marcus's arm or the child he'd just saved from potential abduction or worse. It wasn't the first time Marcus had felt completely invisible to people in uniforms, like he was somehow less worthy of basic human courtesy or respect. Nearby, a stocky black man in an expensive gray suit whispered something urgent and pointed to Evelyn. Trent Hale, Marcus would later learn, her company's head of security, a former police detective with a reputation for aggressive protection. His job was to keep Evelyn and Lila safe from threats, and he clearly didn't appreciate that a complete stranger had stepped into his role today, exposing a massive vulnerability in his carefully planned security protocols. Trent gave Marcus a slow, penetrating look that lasted several uncomfortable seconds, as if waiting for him to slip up somehow, to reveal some ulterior motive lurking beneath the apparent heroism. The EMT cleared his throat, breaking Marcus's thoughts. You're lucky it missed the bone completely. Should still get it properly checked at a hospital emergency room, though. Bullet wounds can get infected easily without proper care and antibiotics. Marcus just nodded non-committally, knowing he wouldn't go. He didn't have insurance that would cover the visit or the prescription. Across the parking lot, Marcus's babysitter's car pulled up slowly. He'd called her from the ambulance, asking her to bring Caleb quickly. His son hopped out eagerly, eyes going wide and frightened when he saw the thick bandage wrapped around his father's dark arm. "Dad!" Caleb ran to him, his young brown face filled with genuine worry, stopping just short of hugging him tightly for fear of hurting the wound. Marcus gave him a small, reassuring smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "It's fine, bud. Just a scratch. Nothing serious. I'm okay." Trent Hale was still watching them intently from across the lot, his expression unreadable. Evelyn Cross remained silent but observant, her eyes never leaving Marcus for long. The feeling was abundantly clear in the air between all of them. Marcus had done something objectively good, something heroic even, but he didn't belong here in their world of wealth and corporate influence. He was a momentary intersection of lives that shouldn't have crossed paths. Now it was time for everyone to return to their proper places in the established social order. Marcus led Caleb gently back to the babysitter's car. He'd catch a ride home with them, come back for his old truck tomorrow when his arm felt better. As they walked away slowly, he felt Evelyn's eyes boring intensely into his back, studying him. He didn't turn around. Some distances weren't meant to be crossed. Some worlds weren't designed to mix. The apartment was quiet that night, almost oppressively so. Caleb had finally fallen asleep after asking what felt like 100 questions about the shooting, about the gun, about whether Dad was really truly okay. Marcus sat alone at the small kitchen table, a glass of water sitting untouched before him, ice slowly melting. The bandage pulled tight across his dark bicep, throbbing with each heartbeat. The local news played quietly on the small TV in the corner, providing background noise. A warehouse worker became an unlikely hero today, the anchor said in that practiced, neutral news voice, when he saved a young girl from what police are calling an attempted abduction at Westfield Mall. Marcus's grainy image filled the screen, standing beside the ambulance, his brown skin and weary face captured in the harsh light of late afternoon, dried blood clearly visible on his shirt. He looked older than he felt, worn down by years of long nights and single parenthood. The caption beneath read simply, Marcus Reed, 34, warehouse worker. The young girl has been identified as Lila Cross, daughter of Evelyn Cross, CEO of Horizon Innovations. Mrs. Cross declined to comment directly, but sources close to the family say she is extremely grateful for Mr. Reed's quick intervention and bravery. Marcus reached for the remote and switched off the TV abruptly. The sudden silence felt heavy, oppressive. He hadn't asked for this kind of public attention, hadn't wanted his name or face broadcast on the evening news. Tomorrow, people at the warehouse would definitely ask questions, would want details he didn't want to give. His supervisor, Carl, would give him that look, half impressed, half deeply suspicious, as if Marcus had somehow deliberately planned this disruption to the orderly warehouse routine. His phone buzzed with a text from his sister Naomi in Ohio. Saw you on the news. My brother, the hero. So proud of you. Marcus didn't respond to the message. Hero, the word sat uncomfortably in his mind, didn't fit right. Heroes were celebrated, paraded around for cameras. Heroes were seen, acknowledged, publicly thanked. For 3 long years, ever since his wife Janelle had died from cancer, he'd worked deliberately at building a life where he could be completely invisible, where no one asked about the nightmares that sometimes woke him violently at 3 a.m., shouting tactical orders to men who weren't there anymore, where no one wondered why a man with his extensive military training and specialized skills was stocking warehouse shelves for barely above minimum wage. The pain in his arm throbbed dully, persistently reminding him. He should take the prescription painkiller the EMT had written out, but he wouldn't bother filling it at the pharmacy. Too expensive even with the discount programs, and he'd managed with basic over-the-counter medication before during other injuries. Always had, always would. 2 days later, Marcus was back at work in the warehouse. The bandage on his arm tugged uncomfortably whenever he lifted a heavy box wrong, but he didn't complain, didn't slow his usual pace. His supervisor, Carl, a gruff white man in his 50s with a perpetual frown, watched him from the office window like he always did when someone's pace slackened even slightly. Marcus kept moving steadily, methodically loading pallets, checking inventory sheets with practiced efficiency. Nights here were long and quiet, exactly the way he preferred them. Just rows of pallets stretching into shadows, the mechanical beep of forklifts moving, the familiar smell of cardboard and accumulated dust. But tonight wasn't normal at all. Word had spread quickly about the mall incident through the warehouse gossip network. Co-workers who had barely nodded at Marcus in passing for 3 years now stopped to ask detailed questions about the shooting. Some seemed genuinely concerned about his well-being and recovery. Others just wanted the vicarious thrill of proximity to something exciting, to real violence and dramatic heroism, something to break the warehouse monotony. Marcus kept his answers extremely short and purely factual, refusing to embellish or dramatize what had happened, then redirected focus firmly back to the work at hand. By midnight, most people had lost interest and wandered back to their own assigned tasks. Near the end of his shift, around 5 a.m., when exhaustion was setting in, Marcus's phone buzzed insistently with an incoming call. Unknown number. He almost ignored it completely, but answered on the third ring, stepping outside. "Mr. Reed." The voice was sharp, male, with a distinct edge of authority and expectation. "This is Trent Hale, head of security for Horizon Innovations." Marcus stopped walking, his instincts immediately prickling with caution. "Mrs. Cross would like to speak with you in person this afternoon at our headquarters downtown. Say, 2 p.m., we'll expect you." It wasn't phrased as a polite request, but as a clear expectation of compliance. Marcus thought seriously about refusing outright, about maintaining his careful distance from that wealthy corporate world. But curiosity got the better of his caution. What could Evelyn Cross possibly want with him now, days after the incident was over? He agreed reluctantly to be there at 2. That morning, after dropping Caleb at school and watching him run eagerly toward his friends, Marcus faced a frustratingly familiar problem. He called his regular babysitter to cover the afternoon meeting, but she had an important doctor's appointment she couldn't miss. He tried his backup option, an elderly neighbor who sometimes watched Caleb for a few hours. She had her regular bridge club meeting. Marcus sat in his truck, staring at his phone, frustration building steadily. He had exactly 2 reliable childcare options, and both were unavailable at the worst possible time. This was his life, a constant, precarious tightrope walk without any safety net, absolutely no margin for unexpected meetings or emergencies. People with money and resources didn't understand what it meant to have zero slack in the system, no backup plans. Finally, he called his sister Naomi in Ohio. She lived 2 hours away but had been wanting to visit anyway. She agreed to drive down, though it would mean missing her own work shift and losing that income. Another debt Marcus would have to repay somehow, another favor owed. At exactly 2 p.m., Marcus stood in the vast glass lobby of Horizon Innovations headquarters. It was all clean, minimalist lines, expensive designer furniture, and young professionals in sharp business clothes moving fast with coffee cups and tablets clutched in their hands. The space felt completely alien, intimidating in its polished perfection. He felt utterly out of place in his flannel shirt and faded work jeans, his steel-toed boots scuffed and worn from warehouse floors. The receptionist, a young black woman with flawless makeup and perfect hair, had looked him up and down critically when he gave his name, her polite professional smile never quite reaching her cool eyes. "Mr. Hale will be with you shortly," she said in a practiced, carefully neutral tone that revealed nothing. Marcus sat in a modern chair that probably cost more than his entire month's rent, trying hard not to shift uncomfortably. The wound in his arm throbbed persistently. He hadn't slept well the night before, the combination of pain and a late shift, leaving him feeling ragged around the edges, slightly disconnected from reality. Above the sleek reception desk, a large screen played a polished company promotional video on loop. Evelyn's face appeared prominently, speaking confidently about innovation and the future, about changing the world fundamentally through technology. In that perfectly crafted corporate setting with ideal lighting and expensive designer clothes, she seemed even further removed from his world than she had at the chaotic mall scene. Trent Hale appeared suddenly by the elevators, his expression neutral but distinctly cold. No handshake offered, no welcoming smile. "This way," he said curtly, turning without waiting. They rode in complete silence to the 27th floor. The elevator was whisper-quiet and impossibly fast, nothing like the grinding, rattling machinery at the warehouse. When the doors slid open soundlessly, Trent led Marcus through expansive, open office spaces where people glanced up briefly from their computers, then quickly looked away. No one seemed particularly surprised to see a man in work clothes walking through their polished domain. They entered a large conference room, where Evelyn was already seated at the head of a long, highly polished table. She looked like she'd stepped directly from a business magazine, navy suit perfectly tailored to her figure, hair pulled back elegantly, but her eyes showed unmistakable fatigue beneath the professional polish. Her phone was buzzing insistently on the table in front of her. She silenced it without even looking. "Mr. Reed," she began formally, her tone carefully measured. "We appreciate what you did at the mall for my daughter." Marcus nodded once. "I'm glad she's okay. That's what matters." Simple and direct, he thought. No need to elaborate unnecessarily. Trent crossed his muscular arms, his posture aggressive. "Here's the situation we're facing. You've been in the news quite prominently. Some reporters are asking detailed questions about you, digging into your background and past. We need to make absolutely sure there's nothing that could potentially put Mrs. Cross or her daughter at risk. For all we know, you could have somehow been part of this incident." Marcus's jaw tightened, anger flickering hot beneath his carefully maintained calm. "I didn't do anything wrong. I saved a child." "That's exactly what we need to be completely certain of," Trent said, his tone brooking absolutely no argument. Evelyn leaned forward slightly, fingers interlaced on the table. "We live in a complicated world where stories get twisted, Mr. Reed, where good intentions can be misconstrued by media or worse. I can't have my daughter's name linked in the press to someone who might—" She stopped herself, seeming to reconsider her words carefully. "I just need to know with certainty that you're not a threat to my family." Marcus had been looked at this way many times before, like he had to actively prove he deserved to stand where he was, to justify his very existence in spaces not designed for people like him. "I'm not a threat to anybody. I work hard. I take care of my kid. That's my entire life." Trent slid a thick stack of papers deliberately across the polished table. "Sign this non-disclosure agreement. Agree to stop talking to the press if they manage to find you. We'll also need to run a comprehensive background check. This is all standard security procedure." Marcus stared at the papers, a cold feeling settling deep in his gut. "So you want me to sign away my legal right to talk about saving her? About what actually happened?" "It's about protecting privacy," Trent said flatly. "About protecting the family from unwanted attention." "It's about control," Marcus said quietly, the words hanging heavy in the air between them. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Evelyn's phone buzzed again with another incoming call. She didn't answer it this time either. Instead, she studied Marcus with a new intensity, as if seeing something in him she hadn't noticed before. There was a military precision to his posture, she suddenly realized, a controlled awareness of the space around him that most civilians completely lacked. The way his eyes had automatically catalogued all the exits when first entering the room, the way he positioned himself with his back to the wall. "We're offering to cover all medical costs from the injury," she said, her tone softening slightly, trying a different approach. "Full treatment, follow-up care, physical therapy if needed, whatever you require." "I'm fine," Marcus said, standing up from his chair deliberately. "I didn't come here for money or favors from you." Trent stepped deliberately into his path, physically blocking the door. "Think carefully about your son before you make this harder than it has to be, Mr. Reed." That hit harder than the bullet had. Marcus went completely still, every muscle tensing visibly. His voice, when it came, was low but perfectly clear, carrying an unmistakable edge of warning that made both Evelyn and Trent pause. "Don't ever use my son to threaten me. Do you understand me?" Something flickered in Evelyn's eyes, surprise, perhaps respect, maybe even shame. For just a brief moment, her carefully constructed corporate mask slipped completely, and Marcus caught a glimpse of the mother beneath the CEO, the woman who had run desperately through the mall in heels, searching for her child. "Mr. Hale." "That's enough," she said firmly, her tone leaving no room for argument. "Mr. Reed is free to go. Thank you for coming in today." Marcus walked out without another word, his footsteps echoing in the corridor. In the elevator, he exhaled slowly, deliberately controlling the anger that had risen hot and sharp at Trent's thinly veiled threat. He had spent years learning to manage that anger, to channel it into precision and controlled action rather than explosive rage. Those were hard-won skills the Marines had given him, refined through countless high-pressure situations where losing control meant losing everything, meant people died. When Marcus got home that evening, Caleb was sitting at the kitchen table doing homework, his small brown hand gripping a pencil tightly. His sister Naomi had made macaroni and cheese, Caleb's favorite comfort food. "How was it?" Caleb asked, looking up with curious eyes, pencil hovering over math problems. "Just a meeting," Marcus said, dropping his keys into the bowl by the door. He didn't mention the paper they wanted him to sign. He didn't mention the way Trent had looked at him like a problem to be managed, a potential threat to be neutralized. Caleb had enough to worry about. Fourth grade was hard enough without adult problems weighing on his young shoulders. The next morning, Marcus's phone rang while he was making Caleb's lunch for school. Turkey sandwich, apple slices, juice box. Carl from the warehouse calling hours before Marcus's shift was supposed to start. This couldn't be good news. "Marcus?" Carl said, his voice uncomfortable and apologetic. "Corporate wants to talk to you. Seems they got a call from someone at Horizon Innovations yesterday about the situation." Marcus frowned, knife freezing mid-spread on bread. "About what situation?" Carl sighed heavily. "Didn't say exactly, but they're nervous about the publicity, about potential liability issues. Might be best if you take a few days off. Paid vacation, you know?" A few days off meant no paycheck, despite what Carl tried to call it. Rent was due in exactly 2 weeks. Caleb desperately needed new winter boots before the snow came. His current ones were 2 sizes too small, hurting his feet badly. The bullet wound in Marcus's arm seemed to throb in time with his accelerating heartbeat. "Carl, I need the hours. You know my situation." "I know, man, but orders came from upstairs way above my pay grade." "Nothing I can do about it at all. Take 2 days minimum, that's all. Think of it as a break." But Marcus knew what paid vacation meant for hourly workers without contracts or unions. It meant go away until we decide if you're worth the trouble and liability. It meant your next paycheck will be light, barely enough to cover expenses. It meant the razor-thin margin between making rent and falling behind just got even thinner. Outside the kitchen window, Caleb was waiting for the school bus, lunchbox in hand, looking small in his 2 sizes too big jacket, a hand-me-down from a cousin. Marcus had promised him a new one this winter, something that actually fit properly. Promises were easy to make. Keeping them took money, which required steady work, which was now being taken away. Marcus's phone buzzed again immediately. Another unknown number. He didn't answer this time. He didn't know yet if the shot he'd taken was the real wound or if the worst damage was still coming, slowly bleeding him out. That night, Marcus sat at the kitchen table after Caleb had gone to bed, the apartment quiet except for distant traffic sounds. The TV was on low in the background, some news anchor talking about the mall shooting again, but Marcus wasn't listening at all. He had a small wooden box in front of him on the table, one he hadn't opened in years. The brass latch was worn from time and handling, and when he flipped it open, the faint smell of gun oil and worn leather drifted out, carrying powerful memories with it. Inside were 3 things carefully preserved: a folded American flag presented at Janelle's funeral, a tarnished military challenge coin from his unit, and a letter creased so many times it was starting to tear at the fold lines. He didn't take the letter out this time. He just looked at it, letting his mind drift back. The air had been hot and dry, the kind of heat that sticks in your throat and makes breathing feel like work. Marcus had lain flat on the roof of a sand-colored building, his rifle balanced precisely on its bipod, every adjustment calculated. Through the scope, the streets below looked close enough to touch. He heard his spotter's voice in his ear, calm and focused, giving corrections. Marcus adjusted his breathing, slow, steady, mechanical. He locked onto the target, a hostile moving through the crowd. Every muscle in his body knew exactly what to do without conscious thought, Operating on training and instinct, the shot had to count. Lives depended on it. It did. The target dropped. Mission accomplished. Back in the kitchen, Marcus shut the box firmly and slid it back into the cupboard above the fridge, behind a stack of old tax forms and forgotten warranties. He didn't talk about those years with anyone. Not to Caleb, not to his sister, not to anyone who asked. People saw the worn baseball cap, the warehouse job, the modest apartment, and thought they knew who he was. That was fine with him, easier even. But tonight, with Trent's threats still echoing in his head, with his job suddenly uncertain, he wondered how far Evelyn Cross's people would go. Would keeping quiet protect Caleb or put him in more danger? Sometimes hiding wasn't the safe choice. Then, federal agents knocked. "Mr. Reed, we need you to come with us. New threats against Evelyn Cross. The shooter wasn't acting alone." At Horizon, the building swarmed with security. Trent was barking orders when Marcus arrived with agents. "What's he doing here?" The female agent replied, "Because he might be the only one who can stop what's about to happen." Marcus walked to the security monitors without asking permission. On screen, a man in maintenance clothes wheeled a cart toward the elevator. His posture was wrong, too rigid, too fast. "That's him," Marcus said. Trent scoffed. "We've got hundreds of contractors. What makes you—" His right hand never leaves his pocket. He's hiding something. False gait to mask a limp. Prior military injury. Marcus was already moving before Trent could respond. The service hallway smelled of chemicals. The man was halfway to the elevator when Marcus called out, "Stop right there." The man kept walking. Marcus closed the distance fast. He kicked the cart sideways and grabbed the man's wrist, twisting until a gun clattered down. The man swung, but Marcus ducked, hooked his leg, and brought him down hard. By the time security arrived, Marcus was kneeling on his back, gun kicked away. Evelyn rushed in, pulling Lila close when she saw the weapon. The lead officer spoke. "If this man had gotten upstairs, we'd have a hostage situation. Reed spotted him in 10 seconds. Evelyn looked at Marcus, really looked at him. "You've done this before, many times. Once or twice. You have specialized training. Let's say I used to keep worse people than him from hurting good people." Evelyn turned to Trent. "From now on, if Marcus says something's a threat, you listen without question." Later, Evelyn approached Marcus. "You didn't have to come today." "I know. Maybe I was wrong about you, Mr. Reed. Maybe. I'd like to talk more about security, about what you saw." Marcus checked his watch. "I need to get back to Caleb. I promised." "Tomorrow, then?" "Tomorrow." Over weeks, Marcus integrated into the security team. Threats continued. Tessa Monroe uncovered that Nathan Crow, Evelyn's former partner, hired the surveillance. At a charity gala, the event was a diversion. Nathan and Trent were infiltrating Horizon. Marcus and Evelyn raced back. They found them in the executive suite. Nathan Crow, a lean black man with cold eyes, smiled confidently. "Hello, Evelyn. Corporate espionage seems right up your alley, Nathan." Marcus created doubt about the stolen data. In that moment, Marcus moved. He disarmed Trent. Security burst in. Later, flying to retrieve the children, Evelyn offered, "Director of Integrated Security, full autonomy." Marcus accepted. "But I need flexible hours. Caleb needs stability." "We'll develop family-friendly policies together." Driving back at dawn, Caleb asked, "Can Lila come over?" Evelyn smiled. This weekend would be perfect. As they crossed the bridge, Evelyn's hand touched his, shared understanding. Marcus Reed had stepped into the light, and in that visibility, he'd found strength, connection, and finally, home.